What you see is what you get. There is no pretense. He is a gentle man. He's an extraordinarily intelligent man, very kind, compassionate, caring, and real.
When you think of David Howard, you think of his commitment to the art of acting.
He's a perfect example of having a long history life as an actor in the theater. He doesn't seek stardom, doesn't seek any of those self-aggrandizement sort of things. He's just a man. He works. Nothing is too small, nothing is too big. He does it all.
He's got a long history here. In all the theaters that exist here. He's known as a consummate artist. So as an artist, his contribution has been huge.
David S. Howard was born in Mount Kisco, New York, in northern Westchester County on September 10, 1928, to Anna Rosen Horowitz and William Horowitz. He was the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents both immigrated separately into the United States in 1911. They later met and were married.
He was from a part of Poland that is now actually in Lithuania. So he was a Russian Jewish immigrant from Tsarist Russia.
His father was a loving man who worked as a house painter to support his family.
He worked on extension ladders and scaffolds when he worked outside until the age of 84 when he fell off a 4-foot step ladder and he had to call it quits. He was a very sweet man.
His mother, Anna, was a full-time housekeeper and loving mother.
She was a wonderful, very caring, very devoted mother.
Her love of music and the arts influenced David at a young age.
When I was 5, 6, 7 years old, she would take me to the Yiddish theater productions on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. I was very much aware of the audience and their reaction to what was going on stage. They were deeply engaged. They were raucous. They would say things to the actors like, "Glauben nicht, er ist ein Ganef." Don't believe him, he's a thief. Or marry the Mädel, she loves you. And that struck me very deeply, the relationship between the audience and the actors.
Mount Kisco in the early 1900s was an idyllic small town, a perfect place for a young boy to grow up.
The whole village was like a vast playground to me. Nothing was off limits. We played ball in the streets. We had fields, we had woods, we had ponds. In the wintertime, we had Tucker's Pond and Potter's Pond at the other end of town. In the summertime, we had swimming holes. We had the elbow and the bush.
As the youngest son, David had responsibilities and chores from an early age.
When I was 7 years old, I used to go shopping a mile away. I'd walk a mile from the house to pick up the groceries. They never worried about it.
David attended elementary school at Mount Kisco Elementary and high school at Mount Kisco High School. He was a good student who was active in student government.
I made honor society for 2 years. I was president of the general organization. We called it GO, which in essence was president of the school for 2 years. But that's not such a big deal because the school was very small. It wasn't like a huge school.
David was an athlete, playing multiple sports for his small-town high school.
Football, basketball, baseball, and track. 1 year of track. I was a terrible basketball player, but I was pretty good at football and baseball.
In those early days, David found the theater was interesting, but was not his primary focus.
Strangely enough, I wasn't that involved in the plays. I did school plays, but I wasn't that deeply involved in theatrical aspirations at that point.
At 16 years of age, David got a summer job working in construction, which he continued throughout his college years.
Doing heavy labor, running a 90-pound jackhammer for one thing.
He maintained his high grades throughout high school and graduated with honors in June of 1946.
We had, I think, a graduating class of about somewhere between 30 and 35. I didn't graduate valedictorian because we had a genius come in from India. He was 14 years old when he graduated, and he was a prodigy. And he was a really nice kid. He's now an outstanding theologian. But he graduated valedictorian, but I didn't mind. It didn't bother me because I really liked John a lot. We used to study together.
After a summer of working construction, he entered Cornell University in the fall of 1946. His major was industrial and labor relations, with a minor in drama.
Interestingly enough, the first day I was at Cornell in September of 1946, there was an activities fair. I signed up for the drama club. They didn't have a theater department at that time as they have now, so the drama club filled that vacuum.
He soon found Cornell's drama club was not what he expected.
I went to one meeting of the drama club, sort of turned off. There was a whole lot of attitude going on. All the kids, they were older than I, and they were all talking about what they had done that summer and summer stock and the actors they had worked with, and I thought, this is not for me, so I never went back to the drama club.
A few months later, David discovered a musical comedy group that called themselves the Octagon Club. He found this more to his liking.
They were a lot less serious. I auditioned for them. I did 2 shows for them in the springtime, original musicals. We played to over 1,000 people each performance in a huge auditorium. I played a couple of goofy characters, and I sang and I danced, and I was probably awful. But I didn't care because I was hooked. That hooked me on theater.
David soon found himself seeking out like-minded students who loved the theater.
I found myself hanging out mostly with kids from Ithaca College, which was downtown Ithaca, and they had a genuine theater department, and I hung out with most of those drama majors most of the time, so that was a signal that I was gradually getting hooked.
Upon graduation from Cornell, his parents encouraged him to enter Brooklyn Law School.
But I knew before I was graduated and before I was admitted to the bar, I knew that I was probably going to go into theater. But I went through it anyway. I went through the whole process anyway, just to please my folks.
He graduated from law school in 1954.
Never practiced because I didn't want to make it a commitment, because I knew that sometime or other in the next few years I was going to go into theater, and sure enough I did.
After graduating from law school, David entered the Army, where he served with the U.S. Army 101st Airborne from 1954 to 1955. When he was discharged from the Army, he went to work for the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, where he was in charge of a project titled Attitudes in Healthcare. Here, he would meet a young woman who would influence his career direction.
I hired a young woman to work as a key punch operator. Her name was Diana Sands, and and I used to talk about theater all the time because she was an actress. Saw several shows that she was in off Broadway, and she finally persuaded me, before she left our employ, she persuaded me to follow my dream and to do something about acting. So because of her influence, I enrolled at Neighborhood Playhouse School of Theater, then studied with Anthony Menino for a couple of years and a couple of other people. But that was the beginning of the process.
At the Playhouse, David was exposed to actors and training he had not previously had the opportunity to study. He began to develop a style he would incorporate into his performances.
I gained a system of working. I gained what they called the method. I gained a method of my own, which gave me kind of a sort of a script to follow. It gave me ideas on how to approach roles.
In 1958, he married his first wife, Joan Smith, who he had met during summers while in law school, when he worked as a commercial fisherman in Nokomis, Florida.
We had 2 children, one in 1963, Carol, and Jessica in 1973.
During these years, David pursued his acting career, but his primary focus was on his family.
And I missed a lot of opportunities because I was devoted to raising the family. But I decided that was more important.
In late 1960, David acquired his equity acting card and began to embark upon his professional career. He landed the role of Diamond Louis in an Equity Library Theater presentation of The Front Page. Shortly after its run, he and his family were on vacation visiting in-laws in Sarasota when David heard about a regional equity theater on the Ringling grounds.
I found out that there was a theater called the Asolo. So I went up to the Asolo and I saw She Stoops to Conquer with Brad Wallace. He was the only one that I remembered from that production. Went back down to the lobby at intermission and I found the house manager and I quizzed him about the theater, about this theater called the Asolo. And he filled me in, and I said in a very brash way. Now, mind you, at that point, I had only done one non-paying showcase production. I said, you know, I'm a professional, and I'm going to work in this theater someday. He looked at me and went, yeah, right.
David returned to New York City, where he performed in some off-Broadway shows. He worked for RCA Institutes, a training ground for television personnel. He also worked for the New Jersey Shakespeare Festival. In 1967, David took a position at Brandeis University as an artist in residence.
I worked there for several years, came back after a brief absence from Brandeis, came back in the early 70s to work as a guest artist. And I was a little bit insecure about the possibilities of an acting career, so I figured I'd better get a teaching license just to be on the safe side. So I worked on my half-time as a guest artist and half-time worked for my Master of Fine Arts, which I got in 1973, the year that my second daughter was born.
While at Brandeis, David began to discover he was learning as much as he was teaching. He had found the method acting formula to work up until now, but at Brandeis, something was different.
When I began teaching at Brandeis, I found out that it didn't work anymore for me. So I don't have any system anymore. I just rely mostly, I go back to relying on instinct and experience. So what I gained was a system of working that worked for a while. When I found out it didn't work anymore, and I found that out by teaching others at Brandeis, I realized that I was the one that really needed the work. And that's when I said, I'm chucking all of this method stuff, and I'm going to rely on experience. And that's when I decided that I needed a good regional theater to hone my craft. And of course, the regional theater that I picked was the Asolo.
As fate would have it, the Asolo was in the process of casting for the 1976 season. David set up an audition.
I read for Bob Strain, the artistic director, and Howard Millman, who at that time was the producing honcho. And they offered me a season of 76, and I accepted, moved on to Sarasota, moved my family down, and that was the beginning of 8 years, my first 8-year stint at the Asolo.
I hired him as an actor at the Asolo Theatre at that time. That's 40 years ago. And we've been in one way or another working together ever since, almost joined at the hip.
During those years, David was in 35 productions at the Asolo. He also worked in other theater productions, including Florida Studio Theater, Banyan Theater, and the Golden Apple Dinner Theater.
I loved what he did, and he liked what I gave him. And so, what a marvelous relationship between actor and director. What more can you ask for?
He may be one of the best actors I've ever known, truly. He has a persona for everybody he plays. He's never just David Howard's playing this. He's always his character. He's an exciting character.
In the late 1970s, during one off-season, David was performing with the Siesta Key Actors Theater when he met a woman who would change his life.
And that's when I met Anne.
We had our first production meeting. I was on the board of directors as well as production manager. And we're waiting and waiting. At precisely 8 o'clock, the door opens and this gentleman walks in jeans, a blue shirt, and a denim jacket sort of slung over his shoulder. And I turned to our director, who happened to be Bill Schroeder, a very well-known name in town, and I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "That's David Howard."
She heard about me from somebody at the Asolo, and I think she was expecting somebody like Tom Selleck to walk in. So I came schlepping in with my jeans jacket over my shoulder, and instead of Tom Selleck, she got Dustin Hoffman, which was okay, which ain't bad.
Somehow I pictured somebody 6'2", big, a He-Man, a stud, or whatever. And in slumps this lovely little Jewish guy. And I thought, okay, this is cool. This is cool.
But we hit it right off. I remember I had a Charlie horse. Something happened to me. And she, being a nurse, helped me get over that quickly. And I found out that she had a lot of other talents.
He was coming out of a divorce. We had kids, and our kids knew each other, and we didn't know they knew each other. Bruce was in college. Carol was living away from home. That's David's daughter. David has Jessica and Carol, and I have Bruce and Lisa. And Bruce, Lisa, and Carol are all within a year of each other age-wise, and Jessica is 10 years younger than the rest of them.
We hit it off, and 3 years later we were married.
March 20th, 1983, under the banyan tree behind the rose garden at Ringling.
Which acted as a chuppah. Chuppah means a canopy, a wedding canopy in Yiddish. And we were married by Rabbi Peter Hyman on March 20th of 1983.
In 1984, David's contract with the Asolo had concluded and the couple's children were grown, except for Jessica. David and Anne, along with Jessica, returned to New York City once more.
I said, well, give us 3 years and we'll see what happens. Well, 3 years turned into 14 years. And those 14 years were very, very exciting years. I got to use my Screen Actors Guild card 6 times. I was in a couple of TV series, on daytime dramas, did commercials, did off-Broadway, did a lot of regional theater, including Howard Millman's Jiva Theater in Rochester, New York. And, but the high point, I think, of those 14 years had to be I'm Not Rappaport.
David was cast in the National Touring Company production in the role of Nate. He was the understudy for Judd Hirsch. In 1987, while on the tour, he received a call to come back to New York City to cover for Jack Klugman, who was performing the role alongside Ossie Davis on Broadway. All went well for several shows, when one afternoon, Klugman lost his voice after the matinee. David and Anne had left the theater and were shopping in New York City.
Something made me come back in early. We didn't have cell phones then, but there was something that said, get back to the theater. I don't know what it was. Walked in and the stage manager said, you're on. So they got me into makeup and costume. Ossie Davis came into the dressing room, put his arm around me, and he said, you're going to be fine. I didn't know, nobody knew at that point, that his house had caught fire that very morning, his house in New Rochelle. He comes in anyway to find out that an understudy, or actually I was called a standby at that point. The standby is going on for the first time, and I had never rehearsed with that cast. I had to go on because Jack had totally lost his voice. So for the first 5 minutes, I thought I was going to lose my voice. Something kicked in after 5 minutes. The adrenaline kicked in. Ossie looked at me as if to say, just talk to me. And we did a fantastic show, got a standing ovation. I don't remember exactly what happened after that point, because it's all like a dream. But it was an incredible show. Saturday night at the booth, full house. And the producer asked me to stay on and do matinees for Jack from that point on.
He also had parts in several television programs and motion pictures, such as 1987's Moonstruck, and in 1998, Meet Joe Black. The highlight of the movies was working with Woody Allen in the late 80s, filming Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Woody Allen was a wonderful director to work for. He never told you anything. He sort of, I remember he gave me the script when I read for the show for Crimes and Misdemeanors. I read the script, had no idea what it was about. I knew I was the head of a family, and we were to have a Seder, a Passover Seder. We got to the shoot, and at one point, Woody said to the cameraman, he said, can we get more light on the rabbi? And I'm thinking, who's the rabbi? And that was the very first time I realized that I was not only just the father of the family, but I was a rabbi. Woody has a habit of not telling you anything. You just go on instinct. And, but he's great to be around anyway.
In 1997, Howard Millman had returned to the Asolo Theatre as artistic director after the theater had fallen on some difficult years. Millman's mandate was to return it to the thriving regional theater it had been. At the same time, David was looking for a change.
There was a snowstorm, an ice storm, and cars were frozen in the driveway, and tree limbs were falling, and the kids were all grown by that point and all out of the house and all on their own. So the empty nest syndrome had kicked in, and Anna and I looked at each other and we said, what the hell are we doing here? Why aren't we in Florida where we belong? So I called Howard and I found a place in the company, and I returned to the company in '97, I think it was, and I've been here ever since.
David is a brilliant actor. He's very easy to work with. One of the things I love about him is that when I give him a direction, he giggles. And when he giggles, that tells me that he loves it. Then he goes on and does whatever he wants to do. But that's David. He's terrific.
It's been the best time of my life. I've had some of the best roles that I've ever been given.
David's a wonderful listener. Not only is he a wonderful listener, he's always prepared. My husband says he's the model actor. He was the oldest member of the company. He was the first one off book, and his lines were perfect. It's very difficult to get David to make a mistake, I think.
David Howard always comes in prepared. He's always learned all of his lines. He is very open to other actors and working with other actors. And so it's a joyful experience. So it's a true talking and listening. We like to talk and listen on stage, and it's a true talking and listening experience, and always joyful with David Howard.
I got to work with him very closely on I'm Not Rappaport. He really wanted me to play his daughter, but then some casting and some schedules turned out a little bit different, so I ended up understudying the part. And here he would be on stage for 2.5 hours straight, and he would still come off stage and run all the scenes with me. And I'm like, this is unheard of. You know, no one is this generous with their time.
David is the master of the deadpan one-line delivery. He can take a look at an audience and give a reading to a line that would break the audience up, send them into the aisles with gales of laughter.
The thing that I will always remember most about David Howard is the twinkle in his eyes. Always, always there. On stage and off. On stage, you look in those eyes and he's there. Perfect.
David is very playful. He's very committed. He does the homework long before you ever see him at the first rehearsal. He still asks the right questions. He's interested. He really wants to find new things in acting and not to jumble anyone's style and not to messing anyone up in their approach to their character, but he still wants to keep it fresh.
I read the play as many times as I can. I try to identify, and most of all, I try to use as much of myself as possible. Stella Adler once said, bring the character to yourself and bring yourself to the character. Well, I have found in my experience that the more I use of myself and the more I identify with the character, the better off I am. That's pretty much what my method is now.
Why buy good luggage? You only use it when you travel. It's nice people remember things you say, but sometimes they remember things you didn't say. At least they're thinking about them. Little League is good for kids. It keeps them out of the house.
According to our records, Mr. Vanderhoff, you have never paid an income tax.
That's right.
Why not?
I don't believe in it.
At the Asolo, David was able to develop relationships with young actors and help them grow in their chosen craft.
And fortunately, I was able to mentor a lot of students at the Asolo, and I think that was a really, really valuable experience.
He's the perfect role model for the young actor because he is always on time, he learns his lines, he follows directions well, he's very specific in what he does on stage. It's great for a young actor to look and emulate, and not everyone is that way.
In the summer of 2014, David and Anne had spent several weeks in London. David had been noticing some physical issues the prior season while performing on stage at the Asolo. When he returned from London, he saw a neurologist about his concerns.
I was beginning to get the tremors, and I was beginning to shuffle a lot and was stooped over. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So the neurologist took one look at me. He spent 5 minutes with me. He says, "You got Parkinson's."
In fact, David says if need be, he would simply incorporate his condition into a role.
But it better be a role where the guy has a tremor and shakes and shuffles. But I'm not too bad at that now. I'm curious to see what would happen. I really would kind of like to be cast in something just to see what would happen.
While David Howard is a revered actor by both fellow actors and audience members, he believes his most important gift is moving the audience.
Tremendous importance to me how I affect the audience. I feel that I have a gift, but that I'm giving something to the audience, not just taking from them. I don't care about curtain calls and all of that sort of thing. I don't care what I'm getting, I care what I'm giving. I think that's the system that I adhere to.
And one of the things that has impressed me for so long is after a show, somebody will come up to him and say, "That was my father," or "That was my husband," or "That was my best friend. You brought them to life for me. You made me understand." Then he feels he's done his job.
And which does he prefer, live stage or film?
But I have found for the most part that in theater itself, there's a friendly, warm atmosphere. I'm not comfortable doing film, however, because it's all out of whack. It's all out of joint. It depends on who's involved in it. I found that in doing films, I found a great friendship in Sir Anthony Hopkins, for example, or the late Robin Williams. They were fun to be around. It just depends on who's in the company.
We asked David Howard his advice for those young actors who follow.
If there's anything else you can do, do it. If there's anything else you like better, do it. If there's nothing else that moves you in your life, you have to do this, do it, but put your whole being into it.